The moment the bomb went off, Arthur's first instinct was to shield Nora. He didn't think, he didn't hesitate, he just moved, shoulders hunched, arms wrapped around her trembling frame, pressing her to the ground as glass shattered and screams tore through the banquet hall. The floor shook beneath them, heat scorched the air, smoke swallowed the chandeliers. Somewhere behind him, the desperate shriek of collapsing wealth echoed through crystal and marble. It was the deal signing for the largest merger in the law corporation's history. And it ended in blood. Arthur's blood. He could feel it now, warm, thick, gushing from somewhere in his abdomen. The ringing in his ears drowned out the chaos. He barely registered the security team dragging the bomber out, the guests fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. His eyes flickered only for one thing. Nora. She was alive. Unscathed, still breathing. His vision blurred, but he smiled. She looked down at him with a pale face and trembling lips. Her wedding ring sparkled against the crimson splatter on his shirt. His shirt. His life. He opened his mouth, coughing. "These 6 years," he rasped. "In your heart. Was there ever a place for me?" Her eyes widened, but before she could answer, someone else screamed from across the hall. "Ah, my arm, Nora, my arm!" It was Jeffrey, slumped against the wall, his suit torn, blood smeared across his sleeve where shrapnel had grazed him, barely. He wasn't even bleeding heavily, but Nora flinched. She pulled her hand from Arthur's, and ran. Ran to Jeffrey. Arthur didn't blink, he just watched as the woman he loved threw herself toward the man who had disappeared for 6 years. And reappeared only after Arthur had rebuilt everything for her. His lips twitched. Not in bitterness, in understanding. The answer had always been there. Why bother asking? His fingers relaxed. The world dimmed. And then, silence, until something shattered. His eyes flew open. Bright light poured in through tall windows. A sea breeze danced through sheer curtains. Violin music played softly in the background, and laughter. He was lying on silk. His hands weren't bloodied. He was breathing. Gasping, Arthur sat up. It was the cruise ship, the deck, the guests, the wedding. His wedding, again. The same tux, the same boutonniere pinned to his chest. He blinked in disbelief. Nora's voice floated from outside, soft, elegant, public. "Thank you all for coming to our union today." Arthur stood. His chest rose and fell with disbelief, and then resolve. He looked down at the flower pinned to his chest. The symbol of a groom. A man waiting at the altar. A man waiting for love that never really chose him. He ripped it off. Let it fall to the floor like dead weight. His fingers went to the buttons of the tux, gone, off, stripped. And before the MC could announce his name, before Nora could walk down the aisle in her shining white gown, Arthur stepped over the railing and dove straight into the ocean. Salt water stung his skin. Wind howled above. Freedom tasted sharp in his throat. The cold pulled him under and woke him completely. He didn't care who saw. He didn't care who screamed. This time, he wasn't going to be her safety net. He was going to be his own salvation. Arthur had never been anyone's first choice. Not in grade school, where his frail body and quiet nature made him the easiest target for boys who needed to prove themselves. Not in adolescence, where his silence was mistaken for arrogance and his smarts earned him ridicule, and certainly not in adulthood, where love was no longer a feeling but a transaction of status, timing, and lineage. He had grown used to being overlooked. Used to pain. Used to surviving in silence. But then, there was Nora. She wasn't just the prettiest girl in school. She was the kind with fire in her eyes, the kind who walked like she owned the wind and talked like rules were things for other people. Arthur still remembered the day she stepped in front of him, back straight, fists curled. "Touch him again," she warned the bullies circling him, "and I'll make sure every girl here knows you cried in the locker room last month." They never touched him again. From that day on, she became his light, distant, untouchable, but brilliant. He loved her quietly. From the back row, from hallways, from behind textbooks and from the shadows of school assemblies. Even when she laughed with Jeffrey, even when she blushed under his gaze, even when she called him her childhood dream. Arthur loved her even then. Even more when that dream collapsed. Jeffrey left the country. And with him, Nora's world. The Law family, powerful, brutal in politics, and obsessed with legacy, cut her off. It was said she'd sacrificed $1 billion opportunity to help Jeffrey once. That she diverted a crucial corporate deal his way, hoping to raise his stock in the company. Instead, he fumbled it, destroyed it, left chaos in his wake. The Law family's shares plummeted, investors panicked, Nora was blamed for everything, her name was blacklisted, her image shattered, and Jeffrey, he disappeared without a trace. That should have been her ending. But Arthur refused. He stood before his own family, the Lynn patriarch behind him, and declared his support for the disgraced heiress. His father warned him, "She doesn't love you, don't throw everything away for someone who won't look back." Arthur didn't answer. He just moved forward. He poured his inheritance, what little was left, into shielding Nora from lawsuits. He used his contacts to funnel quiet investments into her shattered name. He stood beside her in cold boardrooms and hostile press conferences. When others mocked her behind her back, Arthur bore it without a word. Together, though not truly together, they built something new. A phoenix rising from public humiliation. And still, even then, Nora never looked at him the way she once looked at Jeffrey. She never kissed Arthur without obligation, never held his hand unless the cameras were on, never thanked him without following it with, "I'll repay you someday." Repay, like a debt. Not a love. Their marriage wasn't a confession of hearts, it was an alliance the Law family resurrected to salvage its own survival. Nora agreed without resistance. Arthur accepted without expectation. He had already accepted that she wasn't his to keep. But still, he hoped. Maybe, one day, she would wake up. See him. Choose him. That day never came. Because 6 years later, at the peak of her power, when the Law Corporation was once again a giant, when Nora finally became CEO and stood atop the empire they rebuilt together, Jeffrey came back. He returned with slick apologies and a new tan, pretending the past had been a cruel twist of fate, not his own cowardice, and Nora welcomed him with open arms. She didn't tell Arthur. She simply assigned Jeffrey as her personal assistant. Arthur found out when the office printed his name on the schedule. He remembered staring at the paper in his hand, the smile Nora gave Jeffrey just moments earlier still etched into his memory. When he confronted her, her response was cold. "He was exiled for 6 years because of me. I owe him a chance." Oh, again that word. Arthur didn't scream, he didn't accuse, he just nodded and walked away. But he couldn't walk far, because love, no matter how one-sided, doesn't untangle that easily. He stayed through the silent nights, he stayed through the awkward family dinners, he stayed when Jeffrey's voice became the one Nora laughed at the most, he stayed when he became invisible in his own home, until that night. The banquet, the bomber. Arthur never saw the device, only the panic in Nora's eyes as the man lunged toward the podium. Only one person ran toward her. Arthur. He pushed past bodies and upturned chairs. He wrapped himself around her and shielded her. It was never a choice. It was always Nora. And in his dying moments, he reached for her hand, one last time. Only to watch her run to the man who had once left her behind. Jeffrey, clutching his arm, pretending he was the one bleeding out. That was when Arthur understood. He wasn't her husband. He was a placeholder. A sacrifice, an investment she could cash out whenever her heart wanted something else. That love was never love. It was convenience wrapped in gratitude. And Arthur had been in love with a ghost of a girl who only remembered him when she needed someone to fix her mistakes. Now, reborn on the day of their wedding, Tux clinging to his chest like a chain. He tore the boutonniere from his lapel and dropped it at her feet. She would never get to mistake him for the fool again. Salt burned his throat as Arthur fought the waves, his tuxedo heavy with regret and salt water. The ocean clawed at him with icy hands, as if trying to drag him back to the ship, back to the stage, back to the same choice he'd made once, and died for. But he kicked harder. The horizon shimmered. He wouldn't play their puppet again. He wouldn't wear their flower and stand beside a woman who only remembered him when the world turned its back on her. With one final stroke, Arthur reached the shore, coughing up brine and gasping for breath. His fingers clawed into the sand, wet and cold, grounding him in the one truth that mattered. This time, he had chosen himself. Behind him, distant music still floated on the wind. The ship's grand ceremony continued without its groom. Let it. He wouldn't be their fool again. He stood slowly, water streaming from his soaked dress shirt, boutonniere still pinned to his lapel like a wound that refused to bleed. Without ceremony, he plucked it off and let it drop into the sand. The flower crumpled under his heel. Back on the ship, Nora was cracking. The guests began to murmur. The MC, still trying to salvage the moment, laughed awkwardly and turned toward the man standing next to Nora. So the groom's been hiding in plain sight. Come on, young man, don't keep the bride waiting. Jeffrey blinked, his hand froze mid-wave, eyes darting to Nora as if for permission. He was wearing the exact same tux as Arthur, and in that moment of hesitation, the crowd assumed everything. They began to clap. Nora didn't. Her voice cut through the laughter like glass. Don't you dare step forward. The applause stuttered to a halt. Jeffrey looked stunned. His foot dropped mid-step and his face flushed with shame. For once, he didn't have a line ready. Nora's eyes, red-rimmed and frantic, were locked on the aisle. On the door. Waiting, praying. But Arthur ain't there. He was walking away from everything. Past the rocky edge of the beach now, dripping wet and barefoot, he climbed a slope. But something strange caught his eye. Tents, guests, music. Another wedding, he frowned. No, not just any wedding. The familiar hum of the wedding march drifted through the trees. Curious whispers buzzed from the crowd. Isn't that the Law Corporation's CEO? Didn't she already have a ceremony on the ship? Arthur stopped. Nora stood under a white canopy, wedding dress glistening under sunlight. And she was looking straight at him. Before he could move, she stepped forward. Tears shimmered in her eyes. And with thousands watching, she reached out her hand. Arthur, she said. Will you marry me? The crowd gasped. Dozens of phones flew up to capture the moment. But Arthur stood frozen, not from shock, but from disbelief. The same woman who left him to bleed out 6 years ago. The same woman who ran to Jeffrey. The same woman who didn't answer when he asked if she ever loved him. Now, here she was, standing before him with smeared makeup and trembling lips, asking for a future. No apologies, just a public gesture, as if that could rewrite the past. His heart didn't skip, it hardened. She didn't understand. Didn't deserve to. The lights around the canopy flickered on, neon script lit the sky. Miriam loves Domingo. No, Nora loves Arthur. The names were different, but the scene was the same. Manufactured, scripted, desperate. Arthur looked down at the wet sand on his hands, then back at her. The silence dragged, and then he spoke, voice low and firm. No, he said, I won't. Nora's smile shattered. The crowd froze. He pulled his hand from hers, and turned away. Behind him, people began shouting, cameras clicked, rumors birthed in real time. Nora remained still, eyes hollow. Because this wasn't part of her plan. It wasn't the Arthur she remembered, not the one who waited for her smile, not the one who begged to be chosen. That Arthur had died. This Arthur had been reborn. And this time, he wouldn't hand his life over to someone who didn't know what to do with it. Arthur walked down the beach, the words echoing in his mind. Last time I lived for you. This time, I live for me. Arthur didn't return to the cruise ship. He found a quiet inn by the sea, the kind of place without names or photographs on the walls, where no one cared who you were or what kind of scandal followed you like a shadow. The world above the waves buzzed with headlines and gossip. Runaway groom. The CEO who got rejected. Who is Arthur Lynn? He didn't care, not anymore. He sat on the balcony in a borrowed t-shirt and slacks, staring at the horizon while steam curled from a chipped cup of tea. The sky was painted in melancholy tones, clouds smearing golden hues across the water, like a canvas of regrets. A knock came at the door. Arthur didn't move. A second knock. He set the cup down with a sigh and opened it. Nora stood on the threshold. No makeup, hair tied back, no entourage, no script, just her. Pale, small, and trembling. She didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped in and closed the door behind her. Arthur turned his back to her, returning to the balcony, unwilling to offer more than silence. Arthur. She began softly, her voice catching on his name like it wasn't something she deserved to say. He didn't look at her. I remember everything. That made him pause. She took a step forward, watching his shoulders stiffen. The last life, the boardroom explosion, your blood on my hands, you asking me if I ever loved you. Her voice cracked. And I ran to him. Arthur finally turned, eyes like slate. Nora's voice dropped. I hated myself for that. But it was too late. You married him, Arthur said flatly. 3 days after my funeral? She flinched. I was lost. No, he said, stepping forward now. You weren't lost, you were relieved, you thought fate erased your guilt for you, but it didn't. I saw it all. His voice didn't rise, but it hollowed, quiet thunder beneath his ribs. You used my name to rebuild your image, you let the Lynn family sink. While feeding from our last coin, you left my father to die in a cold house while you played happy with Jeffrey. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but Arthur's gaze didn't soften. I didn't know, she whispered. Not about your father, not about. You didn't care to ask. Silence. I came back too, she whispered. I thought this time, I could choose right. I planned everything, reversed the roles, made sure Jeffrey would be the one who looked like a fool. I wanted to prove I could love you properly. Arthur's eyes dropped to her hands, trembling, reaching. I wanted to atone. He sighed. You wanted a reset, he murmured, but I don't want to be the consolation prize in either timeline. He moved past her toward the window. I'm not the same Arthur, I buried him. Nora stood frozen, the door creaked open again. A soft voice called, Arthur? He turned. Isabella stood in the doorway, holding a small bag. Her hair was damp from the ocean breeze, eyes behind soft-framed glasses quietly reading the room. She didn't need to ask what was going on. She knew. She always knew. I brought you some. Sorry, I didn't know you had company. Arthur shook his head. Come in. Nora looked stunned. Isabella gave a polite nod but didn't greet Nora. She set the bag down on the table. Warm ginger tea, and the news is all over the place. Thought you might want something other than their headlines. Arthur smiled faintly. Thanks. Isabella met his eyes and held his gaze. You okay? He hesitated, and then, getting there. Nora stared at the two of them. Quiet rapport, no theatrics, no begging, just calm. I didn't know she was still in your life, Nora said under her breath. Isabella didn't respond. Arthur stepped forward. She was always there, even when I didn't look back. Nora blinked. She was the one who kept my father's clinic running after he passed, the one who sent me flowers every death anniversary, under a name I didn't recognize, the one who left me food when I was too tired to cook, but never once asked for anything in return. His voice dropped. She was the one who mourned when I died, you were the one who got married. Nora began to shake. But I loved you, she whispered. You loved the idea of being saved, he said, and I was convenient. Isabella looked down at the table, not inserting herself, not feeding the drama. Just present, solid, real. Arthur turned to Nora, his voice finally softening. I'm not cruel, Nora, I never was, but I'm tired. She stepped toward him. I can change. I don't need you to change, he said. I needed you to choose me when it mattered. She froze. He exhaled. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm done carrying the weight of your regret. Nora's eyes welled again. I thought if we both came be all suais. It meant we were meant to fix it. Arthur looked past her, toward Isabella, then out to the sea. Maybe it means we're meant to let go. Nora lowered her head. For once, she didn't argue. She turned and walked to the door, her hand paused on the knob. You're right, she whispered. I didn't deserve your love, but I'll spend this life regretting it. She left without another word. The silence she left behind felt lighter than before. Arthur stood still. Isabella stepped beside him. He didn't speak. She didn't ask. She just handed him the cup of ginger tea and stood quietly beside him as he watched the sea. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, Arthur didn't feel like he needed to be someone's savior. Just someone who finally chose himself. 3 days passed before Arthur heard from Nora again. No calls, no surprise visits, no pleading on hotel balconies. Just a letter, neatly folded, placed at the front desk of the Seaside Inn, addressed only to Arthur Lynn. Inside it, no apologies, no poetry. Only an offer. The Law family has agreed to restore the Lynn family legacy, no conditions, full resource access, you'll have control, yours, if you still want it. He read it once, twice, and then he closed his eyes. The letter didn't say why, it didn't mention love or regret, just power, legacy, restoration. It was the very thing his father once dreamed of, the same dream Arthur sacrificed to build Nora's empire. He tucked the letter into his jacket. For the first time in years, he boarded a train heading home. Not to the Law family, to his father. The old man opened the door without a word, as if he'd been expecting this moment. His hair had gone grayer, his back a bit more bent, but his eyes still held the quiet strength that Arthur had spent a lifetime chasing. Arthur didn't speak. He simply handed him the letter. His father read it slowly, lips tight, hands steady, then folded it again and passed it back. "Do you want it?" he asked. Arthur hesitated. "Does it matter?" His father didn't smile. He rarely did. But he placed a hand on Arthur's shoulder and said, "You're not doing this for her anymore, that's all that matters." Arthur nodded. The next day, he returned to the capital. Back to the boardrooms that once spat on his family name. Back to the Law Corporation. And for the first time, they were the ones offering him a seat. The patriarch himself greeted Arthur in private, accompanied by a few stone-faced board elders. Their smiles were thin, their voices polite. "Welcome back," they said, "we've missed your vision." What they really meant was, "We're desperate." Because Nora had done the unthinkable. She'd exiled Jeffrey. Cut him off completely. He was stripped of his role, banned from the building, and his name quietly removed from every press release. The media never got a reason, but insiders knew his fall from grace was swift and merciless. Arthur said nothing about it. He simply signed the contracts. Then took a quiet seat beside Nora at the next board meeting. She didn't speak to him directly, but when a young executive whispered something under his breath, loud enough to be heard by half the room, Nora slammed her pen down. "If anyone in this room believes Arthur Lynn is here as a charity case," she said coldly, "you're free to walk out, permanently." Silence followed. Her eyes dared anyone to challenge her again. Arthur didn't look at her, but deep inside, something wavered. She hadn't just defended him, she'd staked her name on it. Later, when they walked down the hallway side by side, Nora didn't try to make small talk, but she did pause beside the elevator. "I meant what I said in there." Arthur gave her a glance. "You're not worried about what people will think." Her expression didn't flinch. "They already think I'm the woman who chased after a man who rejected me on 2 separate wedding days. At this point, the truth doesn't scare me anymore." The elevator arrived, she didn't enter. Arthur stepped inside alone, and for the first time, he wasn't sure what she wanted anymore. The days that followed were strange. She didn't text him late at night. She didn't bring up the past, but she made space for him, in meetings, in the company structure, in the public eye. And the public didn't like it. Isn't he the one who embarrassed her? He must have something on her. Pretty face, no backbone, using her name to get power. The headlines came like fire, but Nora didn't blink. She posted a single photo to her social feed, the original draft of the merger Arthur built for her 6 years ago, his signature in the corner. The man who built everything from the shadows is finally in the light, let him stand. Arthur stared at the screen, and his grip tightened. Because it was the one thing he never asked for. Recognition. And she gave it. But why? That night, he returned to the Lynn estate. His father was in the study, cleaning out old ledgers, most of them filled with losses Arthur had once tried to ignore. "You're quiet," his father said. Arthur folded his sleeves. "Do you believe people can change?" His father didn't look up. "You didn't ask if they could apologize, you asked if they could change." Arthur nodded. "They can," the old man said, "but rarely for someone else, only for themselves." Arthur leaned against the doorway, that thought heavy in his mind. Nora wasn't chasing him anymore. She was rebuilding something. But was it trust, image, redemption, or a script she rewrote after watching it fail once? He didn't know, and that bothered him more than anything. A week later, Isabella showed up at the headquarters, quiet as always, board in hand, a lanyard around her neck. She'd been offered a new role by one of the law family's subsidiaries. No one knew she was connected to Arthur, no headlines had her name, no cameras followed her home. But she found Arthur during lunch, slipped him a small envelope with a single report inside. "Something you should see," she said. Inside, proof of a quietly shifting bank account under the law family's name, funds moving overseas, an account that had once been under Jeffrey's control, but hadn't been shut down. It was still active, still draining, and now, under Nora's name. Arthur's pulse slowed. He looked up at Isabella. "I don't know what it means yet," she said, "but I thought you should know." He nodded. Later that night, Arthur stood on the rooftop of the law building, staring down at the city that once buried his name. Behind him, the door opened. Nora's voice floated up. "I didn't know you were the type to brood under moonlight." He didn't turn. She walked up beside him, the wind tugging at her coat. "I thought we were rebuilding," she said. "You haven't spoken much." Arthur looked at her now, really looked. "Are we rebuilding, Nora, or are you laying a prettier foundation for the same trap?" Her face didn't change. "I didn't touch that account." "Didn't you?" "I shut down everything linked to Jeffrey." "Then why is one still open under your name?" A beat of silence. Then, softly. "Because it wasn't his." Arthur didn't blink. "Then whose is it?" She looked at him. "Mine." The wind whipped between them. Arthur waited. "I started it before the wedding," she admitted. "Back when I wasn't sure if you'd ever come back. It was my escape plan." She turned to him fully now. "But I haven't touched it since you said no on the beach." Arthur didn't believe her. Not fully. But something in her voice was different. Not desperation, just exhaustion. "You wanted to know if I've changed," she said. "Maybe I haven't. Maybe I'm still just trying to be the person you once deserved." She stepped back, giving him space. "I won't beg again," she said. "But if you stay, I'll give you everything, not for love, for legacy." Arthur stared at her, and thought about how love meant nothing when there was no trust. But power was leverage, and leverage could build something new. He would stay. But this time, it wouldn't be for her. It would be for the Lin family. And for the man who finally understood, some debts aren't paid with apologies, they're collected, with interest. The jet cut through the clouds like a silver blade, and below, the unfamiliar city glimmered with promise and danger. Arthur stepped off the tarmac into a storm of cameras and contracts. The billion-dollar deal had been hyped across global business networks, the law corporation's most ambitious foreign expansion to date. But the truth? It wasn't his name on any of the paperwork, it was Nora's. He was just the executor. The face. The risk. She called him every night. Her voice poured through the speaker like a balm, soft, warm, more tender than anything he remembered from the last life. "Did you eat?" she'd ask. "I saw the press conference, you look tired." "Don't forget to sleep. I'll be here when you wake up." It would have been easy to believe her. To forget. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw it again. The ballroom, the fire. His lungs filling with smoke as the world collapsed around him. The weight of Nora's body beneath his arms as he shielded her from the blast. The way her hand slipped from his fingers as she ran to Jeffrey. His last breath tasted like ash and disappointment. Sometimes, he'd wake in the middle of the night clutching his ribs as if they were still torn open. And then, one evening, she showed up. Unannounced. Soaking wet from the rain, her coat clinging to her frame, eyes red, breath short. Arthur opened the door and stepped aside without a word. She entered like a shadow unraveling. "I came on the earliest flight I could get." He didn't ask why. She placed a folder on the table. His name was stamped all over the financials. The company they'd created overseas, the one he now managed, was under audit. The contracts, the shell firms, the acquisitions. All of it, she whispered, is illegal. Arthur said nothing. Nora was shaking now. "I didn't know at first. I trusted the board's legal team. I thought it was airtight, but someone tippies it off the regulators. Arthur, if they come down on the company, they won't stop with me. You signed everything. You'll go down first." Still, he said nothing. She stepped forward, voice cracking. "They'll investigate you, arrest you, bury you. I've seen this happen before." Arthur turned away from her, walking toward the window. Outside, thunder rolled above the city skyline. "I already spoke with the board," she continued, "and there's still time to fix it, but you need to cut ties, let them blame me. I'll make a public statement, say I acted alone." "No." She stopped. Arthur turned back to her slowly. His voice was steady. "We'll file for divorce." The word hit like a slap. "What?" "You're the CEO. If we divorce now, it severs the legal connection. It'll fall on the Lynn name. I'll say I forged your signature. It won't hold up under deep scrutiny, but it'll buy you time to clean the rest before they dig deeper." She took a step back, horrified. "No," she breathed. "No, Arthur, we're married now. Please don't leave me again." Arthur didn't move. His jaw was tight, his hands in his pockets to keep them from shaking. "You left me once," he said quietly. "I died protecting you." "I know," she whispered, tears streaming freely. "I know. That's why I came back. That's why I tried to do better, but not like this. Don't die for me again. Don't sacrifice yourself again." He looked at her now, fully. Her makeup had smudged from the rain. Her mascara bled into the corners of her eyes. She looked like the woman he had died for, only smaller, more human. "I'm not dying," he said. "I'm deciding." She reached out and grabbed his arm. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," he said gently. "Not in time." His voice was calm, almost too calm. But inside, something fractured again. Not out of rage, but grief. Because for all her flaws, all the pain, all the history, they had built something real this time. He had seen it in the quiet gestures. The way she kept his photo on her desk. The way she looked for his approval after every meeting. The way she protected him, even when the world called her foolish for it. And now he was about to take that all away from her. Again. "I can't do this without you," she said through clenched teeth. "Yes, you can," he said. "You're Nora Law." She shook her head, crying harder now. "Don't walk away from me again." Arthur reached up and gently touched her cheek. His thumb wiped a tear away. "I'm not walking away," he said. "Then why does it feel like you're disappearing?" she whispered. He didn't answer. Because deep down, he knew this was the only way to ensure the Lynn name wouldn't be destroyed, to ensure his father wouldn't lose everything, to ensure she lived the life she always wanted. Even if she had to live it without him. He stepped back, slowly. Nora's arms dropped to her sides. He reached for the divorce papers already prepared on the desk. He'd been drafting them ever since he landed, just in case. Just like last time. But this time, he would file them first. He signed them in front of her, quiet, precise. Tears dripped onto the paper from her chin. He didn't lift his eyes. He just folded the document, placed it in the envelope, and handed it to her. She clutched it like a death sentence. His voice, when it came, was barely audible. "For you," he said, staring at the rain through the window. "I'd do anything." He turned slightly, just enough for her to see the faintest, saddest smile at the corner of his lips. Even this. The Law estate looked nothing like it used to. Once proud walls now wore cracks like wounds. The ornate gate hung crooked on rusted hinges. The courtyard fountain, once Nora's favorite spot for press photos, was dry, choked with leaves. And in the center of it all, Arthur stood alone, dressed in a black coat that fluttered softly in the breeze. In the distance, the flashing red and blue lights painted the estate in pulses of justice. The officers dragged Jeffrey down the marble steps first. He screamed the moment the handcuffs locked. "This is a mistake. I was just following orders. I didn't know anything. Call my lawyer. I said call him now." He twisted toward Arthur as if looking for pity. He found none. Arthur didn't even blink. Then came Nora. She didn't resist, didn't fight, but her body trembled as if she'd been struck by lightning. Her wedding ring had already been removed, replaced by the cold weight of steel shackles. Her eyes were wild, mascara streaked across her cheeks, hair undone in the chaos of it all. She stopped in front of him. The moment her eyes locked onto his, her face cracked open. "You set me up," she choked. "You used me." Arthur didn't speak. The officers waited, watching. Nora stepped forward. The chains rattled. "I trusted you, Arthur. I thought, after everything, I thought we could fix it." Arthur reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a silver lighter, flicked it once. A flame rose, then died again as he lit a cigarette with practiced ease. He looked at her, gaze flat, unreadable. "I gave you a chance," he said coldly, "but you chose to lie again." Nora's breath hitched. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words died in her throat. The officers pulled her back. She didn't resist, only sobbed. Not the sharp, rehearsed cries of a CEO under pressure, but the quiet, broken sobs of a woman who had finally realized no one was coming to save her. Not even the man who once died trying. The doors to the cruiser slammed shut, the tires turned, and just like that, she was gone. Arthur turned back toward the estate, cigarette still burning between his fingers. He stared at the crumbling archway of the Law family legacy and let the silence sink in. Because this wasn't an accident. It had never been an accident. Everything, the divorce, the overseas scandal, the generous second chance Nora thought she had earned, had been built from his plan. The moment she showed up in that rain-drenched hotel room with trembling hands and trembling eyes, he had known. She hadn't changed. Not truly. She had just learned how to sound sorry. But trust was never about the apology, it was about consistency. And hers cracked under pressure. Arthur spent months preparing while pretending to forgive. He used her access to the accounts she thought he never noticed. Used the legal loopholes buried in the very contracts he had once signed on her behalf. He moved the offshore shell companies under his own name, funneled her assets into controlled collapses, diverted liability until the audit hit like a perfect storm, and then, he gave her one last choice. To tell the truth, she didn't, so he finished what he started. The Lin family was no longer a footnote. He had restored it, without Nora, without her family name, without her mercy. He took back everything that was once stripped from him. And more. There was no joy in it. No triumph. Only clarity. He flicked the cigarette to the ground and crushed it beneath his heel. Behind him, footsteps approached. He didn't need to look. He knew it was Isabella. She always knew when to show up, never too soon, never too late. She came to stand beside him. No words, no questions, no expectations. She wasn't there to pick up the pieces, only to witness the man who no longer needed picking up. Arthur spoke quietly, more to himself than her. "This time," he said, watching the wind scatter dust across the Law family crest, "I didn't jump for love, I jumped to swim back to myself." The silence stretched. A soft breeze passed between them. Then Isabella turned, nodded once, and left without needing to say goodbye. Arthur didn't move. Not until the clouds parted and light touched the front step of the estate. He walked to the edge of the ruined threshold, boots echoing faintly against marble that once hosted empires. And when he reached the door, he looked up, breathed in, then stepped through. "Dad?" he whispered. "I'm home."